Hey everyone, welcome to the channel and I hope you're doing well. If you're new here, what we do on Unfortunate Ends is talk about things like crime, mystery, assassination and all sorts of stuff like that. So if you're interested, be sure to stick around. Anyway, let's get into today's case. Today, we are looking into the case of Juana Barraza, a woman with a traumatic childhood who struggled to find work, but eventually became a wrestler. Yet, due to her poor economic conditions, she turned to a life of crime to make a living, and eventually devised a plan which would turn her in to La Mata Viejitas, or the Old Lady Killer. Here we look at her crimes. Juana Barraza was born on the 27th of December 1957 in a rural area in the state of Hidalgo, which is north of the country's capital, Mexico City. Her father, Trinidad Barraza Avila, was a police officer, and her mother, called Justa Samperio, was an alcoholic prostitute. 3 months after the birth of Juana, her mother abandoned her husband to begin an adulterous relationship with Refugio Samperio, a married man who was also her stepfather. Juana never learned to read or write, and had a very rocky relationship with her mother as a child. Tragically, when Juana was just 12 years old, her mother exchanged her to a man named Jose Lugo in return for 3 beers. While Juana was in the care of Jose, he repeatedly sexually assaulted her and forced himself upon her. As a result, she fell pregnant twice, first having an abortion, but on the second occasion, giving birth to a baby boy. Juana remained with Lugo for the next 5 years, waiting for someone to save her as he continued to prey on her and use her for his vile desires. Finally, after those 5 years, her uncles found her and rescued her. But as it turned out, Juana's mother had been lying to the rest of the family this entire time, saying that Juana had left with a grown man of her own free will. Years later, Juana would weep on camera under arrest as she said, "That is why I hated older women." Juana finally left for Mexico City at the age of 20, after her mother died of end-stage liver disease. There she underwent several failed marriages, from which she had 4 children with 3 different fathers. Sadly, Juana would later suffer the loss of her eldest son, Jose Enrique, from injuries he sustained during a mugging when assailants attacked him with a baseball bat when he was just 24 years old. During the 1980s and 1990s, Juana worked various jobs and toured central Mexico as a masked wrestler. Before her arrest, Juana was a professional wrestler named La Dama del Silencio, meaning the Silent Lady. She reportedly told police she chose the title because I'm quiet and keep myself to myself. When she wasn't wrestling, she would at times also sell popcorn outside of the lucha libre venues. However, despite being a relatively good wrestler who enjoyed the gigantic fake battles, the pay was quite poor and inconsistent. Then in 1995, after the birth of her 4th child, Juana found herself short of cash and resorted to stealing items from shops. Following this, she began to burglarize homes in order to increase her profits. After seeing how lucrative this could be in 1996, with the aid of a friend named Araceli Tapia Martinez, she created a plan to steal from the elderly. The 2 women would dress in white clothes and pretend to be nurses, thus gaining access to the homes of old defenseless citizens, living alone and robbing them once inside. Nevertheless, her friend Araceli, with whom she had devised the criminal scheme, was in a relationship with a corrupt federal police officer named Moises Flores Dominguez, and together, they decided to betray Juana. After a burglary Juana committed alone, Moises Flores met Juana and demanded 12,000 Mexican pesos, equivalent to about $600 to keep quiet, and if she couldn't provide the money, he would arrest her. It's likely she continued her ways despite this setback, as her main job as a wrestler didn't give her a very good quality of life. But in the year 2000, Juana, who was now 43 years old, retired from wrestling. Her situation became desperate, and this led her down a much more sinister path. On November 25, 2002, Juana murdered her first victim, Maria de la Luz González Anaya. Once inside her apartment, González made a comment that Juana found insulting, causing her to become infuriated and beat González before fatally strangling the woman with her bare hands. Juana did not kill again for 3 months. After this period, crimes in the area increased sharply. By November 5, 2003, the police had enough evidence and witness testimonies to believe a serial killer was involved in this dramatic increase in homicides. Initially, they thought it was a tall person posing as a city council nurse or social worker in order to gain their victim's trust, but there was still a long way of catching her. Initially, the police were reluctant to make this information public, as the killer had become a sort of political weapon in the fight between Mexico's federal government and the capital's city council. Opposing political forces were at play, and the federal government attacked the capital city's council, claiming that violence had increased during this term. Furthermore, a recently implemented public healthcare plan for residents over 60 years of age was blamed for the killings because, in their opinion, the murderer was a nurse. In December of that year, the police released a wanted poster with 2 eyewitness sketches of the killer, one more feminine and another more masculine looking. These sketches were labelled as persons of interest only, and it wasn't until the following year that the police finally admitted to the existence of a serial killer. In mid-2005, Juana began a relationship with a taxi driver named Jose Francisco Torres Herrera, who soon became her accomplice. After this, the attacks increased in range and frequency, and the murders changed from occurring during the day to now occurring during the night. Finally, on the 28th of September 2005, an upper-class woman, Carmen Camila González Miguel, mother of Mexican criminologist Luis Rafael Moreno González, was killed. This caused the police to launch a special operation under the name Operation Parks and Gardens. During this operation, officers patrolled areas where the killer's activity had increased, and pamphlets advising the elderly to be wary of strangers were distributed, along with new sketches. The police even paid some elderly women to act as bait in park areas. Mexico City police used 2 profiles of the killer, which contradicted each other at times. A physical one based on eyewitness accounts described the killer as a man dressed as a woman or a robust woman dressed in white, height between 5'6" and 5'7", robust complexion, light brown oval face, white cheeks, blonde hair, delineated eyebrows, and approximately 45 years old. A psychological profile was also used, developed by the Mexican Department of Justice after examining cases of serial killers that targeted elderly women in France and Spain, and instead called for the arrest of a man with homosexual preferences, victim of childhood physical abuse, lived surrounded by women, he could have had a grandmother or lived with an elderly person, has resentment to that feminine figure, and possesses great intelligence. Because of this profiling, police announced that they were looking for a homosexual man, transvestite, or transgender. As a result, they arrested 49 transvestite prostitutes who were released when their prints didn't match those collected from the crime scenes. After October, the murders had stopped, making the investigators consider the possibility that the killer had committed suicide. However, on the 25th of January 2006, Juana was seen by a tenant leaving her last murder scene, where she had taken the life of a landlady by the name of Ana María de los Reyes Alfaro. As she was fleeing the crime scene, a passing police patrol caught up to her and arrested her. Although she could not read or write, police found a trophy room with newspaper clippings of murders and objects taken from the victims when searching her home. While in custody, Juana was made to pose next to eyewitness sketches of the killer, a move criticised as misleading to the public, causing them to believe the police had been in the right direction to finding Juana, when they weren't even close. To understand how the old lady killer got away with so many crimes, it's necessary to look at what her methodology was. During the murders, Juana would approach her victims on the street or knock on their door, pretending to be a city council nurse or social worker. First, she disguised herself by dressing in white clothes, but she later acquired a genuine nurse's uniform. She gained the victims' trust and entered their homes by offering massages or helping to obtain medicines and other necessities. If her victims were distracted, she would strangle them directly. However, if not, she would beat them first using moves she had learned during her wrestling career. Juana usually strangled her victims manually, or by a string-like object of some sort, which was found within the victim's own home, which she would then leave at the crime scene. Once her victim was dead, she would then rob them, primarily for her gain, but she would also keep some of their belongings as trophies. At the time of her arrest, Juana was 48, and most of the police could not believe their eyes, for no one could imagine a Mexican lady to be a serial killer. It was unheard of. They believed that an act of this degree could only be completed by a man. In any case, the old lady killer would soon be put on trial and punished for her crimes. When it comes to Mexican trials, there are no juries and few public hearings. Instead, prosecutors and defense lawyers present their evidence to a single judge during largely closed-door proceedings. Although the Mexican criminal system has undergone various significant reforms since 2006. At the time of her sentencing, it's believed she could have been responsible for as many as 30 other similar murders that went unsolved. The criminologist associated with Juana's case believed she was so damaged by her experiences that she ended up targeting old ladies because she identified them with her mother. It seems that Juana harbored a deep resentment towards her mother for letting Jose abuse her. On Juana's first court appearance, she told the court, "I only killed one little old lady, not the others. It isn't right to pin this on me." When asked to reveal her motive, she said, "I got angry." She was charged with 16 murders in total and aggravated burglary, although the prosecutors had hoped to charge her with 27. Her fingertips were found at 10 of the murders, placing her on site, but even so, she pleaded guilty to just one murder, confessing to having strangled a woman with a stethoscope. Despite denying all involvement in the murder spree, in which at least 30 women have died, although the number could be as high as 50, Juana was sentenced to 759 years in prison, the longest prison sentence for murder to ever be handed out in Mexico. But she will be paroled regardless in 2058 at the age of 100. While inside, she was courted by a male prisoner, who after 3 years of writing to her, had her to agree to marry him. However, she called off the marriage after a year, claiming that meeting him had taken away all the attraction and excitement from the relationship. Juana Barraza has been the inspiration of various television shows and documentaries. These include La Mata Viejitas, from the documentary Instinto Asesino, the episode Machismo from Criminal Minds, as well as various others. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Juana Barraza. I hope you found it interesting, and let me know what you thought of the case down below. I hope you guys have notifications turned on so you get all my videos as soon as I upload them, and if you have any suggestions, be sure to leave them in the comments. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next unfortunate end. Thanks.